Hello, and welcome once again to another fun-filled heretical episode of Inside the World of Mack's Headroom. Take two, because I just did take one, and then I realized I didn't fact-check, and I made a terrible mistake, and I just couldn't put it on the air. So here we go, take two. I wanted to talk today about the TV sensational, production called the Tiger King, which of course everybody's bored to death with commentary on it. And I really hate talking about stuff that everybody talks about, unless I can put a different spin on it in some way. That's why I call it the heretical world of Mack's Headroom. And so I do have a little bit different spin to offer the Tiger King narrative, and I want to try to offer it to you. It's just an opinion, but I would like to present it because I think it is a little bit different. There's been references to what I want to talk about in some of the interviews that you've seen on other channels with some of the cast of characters, but I want to try to actually concentrate just on this. But I'm not going to tell you what it is yet because I'm going to hold you in suspense unless you click me off in 2 seconds. Damn it. Anyway, when I graduated high school in 1971, how at a graduation ceremony, there's usually somebody who gives a talk to the students to inspire them about, their approaching adulthood, and I don't know what you call that, the commemoration speech or something. Well, anyway, at my graduation, we had a aspiring young journalist named Walter Jacobson, who went on to be probably the archetype of investigative journalism, really, here in Chicago, but it broadened. I think he was the greatest guy in the world. Well, during that speech, nobody knew who he was at the time. Actually, he had gained no fame at that point, and everybody's bored. They want to leave. Everybody's wanting to party. It's hot out, and he starts talking about the media. And basically, we all know this now, but this was in 71, okay? And he went on this long-winded, very academic sort of discussion of how the media distorts reality. And he basically left us with the understanding that we shouldn't trust the media. And he went on showing all the little technical things they did back in those days to distort reality. Lenses to control the the emotional atmosphere of an interview, points of view, editing, clipping. He went over all this stuff with us, and it was really a very inspiring speech. And then he went on to be like the number one investigative journalist in Chicago, and I think everybody equally would have loved the guy, except some people made fun of him, but everybody, that's human nature, So, with that in mind, many of you know, if you watch my show, since I have 1 million subscribers, I can never avoid that. You know that I think systemically. I was a family therapist. I can't help but to look at things, the world, from an interactional point of view, which means I don't really look, except in certain instances, unfortunately, but I won't get into that. I don't try to look for good guys and bad guys. I try to look at the interaction that produces a dysfunctional sequence of events. You can never find the beginning of a circle once it's drawn. It's a circle. You know what I mean? So, anyway, a lot of the a lot of the YouTube videos that I've watched, of which I've watched many, and I've also watched The Tiger King in its entirety 3 times, okay? So, I'm not no expert, but I don't know any of their names, but that's because I'm getting old and feeble. But, I do know, the narrative pretty well. And so, but by watching a lot of other people's, with no disrespect, watching other people's interviewing the cast of characters, I've heard every single, wait, I got to do this dramatically. I've heard every single one of them make some reference to Netflix. And And in reference to Netflix, to use a cliche, controlling the narrative. But that seems to get overshadowed by all the drama and intrigue that's in the story. But you see, if you're a systems thinker, then it's almost impossible to just leave out, at least as a character, if not a puppet master, okay, from this system, of being a part of this system. You just can't. How can you do it? They're the ones that constructed it. But it brings forth, I'm sure you all know that, and I'm sure you've heard those little tidbits that you hear on other people, the guy, I'm sorry, I don't know his name. This is probably a horrible way to refer to him, but it's also in direct relationship to how Netflix portrayed him. The guy with no teeth, but who has teeth. He was asked, from what I understand, to pose without teeth. I also know for sure he was asked to pose without his shirt on, making him look, in my opinion, like a gay hooker. Okay? Netflix asked him to do that. And I guess, it's my belief that from an ethical point of view, I suppose, Netflix did not take into consideration some of the fallout, or maybe they did, gulp. And that's even more distressing. Because, you see, if the narrative would have ended the way it did, first of all, I mean, not the way it did, the way it could have ended, or if the narrative was produced the way it could have been produced, maybe some of this additional fallout couldn't have happened. And just to cite a few, for instance, as much as I think Carol Baskin is a bitch and very likely, a bitch, I don't like those clinical terms, but, and is totally capable of murdering her husband, her ex-husband, and her current husband if he stops singing to her. But, I do believe it's very possible. Did she feed him to the tigers? I don't know. But, you could also hire a hitman, too. You don't have to dramatize it so much. But the fact is that as a result of the production of this TV show, Carol Baskin's case is being reopened, and I don't know. Maybe it's fair, maybe it's not. But I would really hate to think that Netflix went into this kind of hoping that it would be reopened, which would create re-interest in Tiger King as it burns out, as any other sensationalist narrative does. But see, now this has fallout. You see. And so it keeps the narrative alive and well. Another example, fucking poor Joe's ass is in jail. Come on. I mean, do you really think he wanted to off Carol? He might have said he wanted to off Carol. He might have felt like he wanted to off Carol, but I got to tell you something. I have felt like offing people, me as well. Have I ever done it? Fuck no. But let's be transparent. I felt like killing somebody a couple of times. I'm sure many of you have. Whether you do it or not, it's a different story. I think that, again, Netflix is like the Geppetto, and I think that in many ways the cast of characters are the puppets, and therefore don't have quite the control over their own story because of the way that Netflix has controlled the narrative, to be hip. And I guess, what it boils down to for me, because I've watched the show 3 times, the whole season. But, I think that the part to me has to do with ethics. And some of you will disagree with me. Just be polite in the comments section, please. But, I would hate to think that Netflix actually went into this knowing that, one, Carol's case could be reopened, and maybe we're hoping that it would to continue the interest. Oh, I would hate to think that, but my critical mind says it is possible. I would hate to think that they knew that Sleazy Jeff would end up with a zoo, a babysitter, and a young wife. and apparently living happily ever after. I would hate to think they knew that was going to happen, because all you got to do is look at the guy for 2 seconds and everybody in the world knows what a scumbag he is. I would hate to think that, well, see, I don't know this either. I shouldn't say that, but, I would hate to think that that Joe being in jail is, or not getting out of jail is somehow in relationship to the Netflix series. And, I just touched my eye. Shame on me. But I just have this feeling that there's certain ethics involved. Yes, it's great to produce a great TV show. I loved it. I watched it 3 times. I've watched all the interviews. I'm totally intrigued. But every single person that I've seen interviewed that's part of the cast of characters, except Netflix themselves, they've never been challenged to my knowledge yet. Just like with the Leaving Neverland thing. Oh, God, Alex Gibney, I think it was like roasted before they even aired it. But has Netflix been challenged on this? No, I don't think so. It's just these little peripheral comments you hear during these interviews. Netflix misperceived it. They left this story with a lot of people hanging in limbo. But the thing is, they didn't really leave the story, because as long as those people are in limbo, then the narrative continues. And now they're going to make a movie out of it. So don't tell me, somebody has to buy the rights from them if they're not actually doing it themselves. I don't know what the mechanics of it are. But they're turning it into a movie. And so therefore, they are purposefully continuing the narrative and also continuing the emotional escalation that surrounds this story. Because what went from a goofy, weird story into now a very serious series of accusations and consequences, it's big time, and I don't think it was by accident. If you believe that Jeff Epstein was murdered, you could at least have enough critical thinking to think that perhaps Netflix had their fingers in how this narrative ended up, with the hopes of it continuing as time went on, so it would recreate interest in the story. It would also recreate a sequel, I believe it would be called. And we all know, certain sequels. I used to reluctantly sort of be a fan of Entourage, embarrassingly. But as soon as they made the movie, it was gross. It was just an effort to make more money. And you see, Netflix is an industry, right? And so, of course, they want to make money. So whether they sold the rights of Tiger King to another production company or whether they're actually going to produce a film, they are definitely trying to continue the narrative, right? And in that attempt, what it does is it affects human lives. It affects people looking at Doc, whatever the hell his name is, as perhaps a sex cult leader and perhaps a pedophile. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But until there's been charges brought against the guy, I'm going to say, well, maybe he's inappropriate. Okay, but there's a lot of shit being talked about him. As far as the poor guy with no teeth that has teeth, I think it's a crying shame. Everybody says, he sold himself out to Joe and Joe took advantage of him. Yeah, but who else took advantage of him? Netflix. They told him not to put his teeth in. They told him to pose without a shirt. They had him laying down in a seductive position. It made him look like a boy-ho. Let's face it, and the kid isn't. He's really a decent guy, at least in the interviews I've seen. Another one that I think is really interesting is that the way that the narrative was constructed by Netflix to make it appear as if that other dude, see, I don't know his name, but the guy who wears the hat and has the box of cigarettes in front, and he's like the documentarist, it makes it look like he was really the orchestrator of this. But I don't believe he was. I really believe that Netflix employed him in some way to serve a function for what their end goal is. I suppose you could call this a conspiracy theory, but I don't know. The fact is that the consequences are there. Carol Baskin's case is being reopened. Joe's in jail, and he looks like kind of a volatile idiot at times. I don't think he was a volatile idiot at all. I think when he shot that thing, I think he was just being crazy, but not clinically crazy. He was just being goofy, That's how he is. That's who he is. That's what makes this series, that he shot the mannequin. But, does that mean he was going to kill her? Of course not. But he's in jail right now. Okay? Jeff Lowe's driving around on a four-wheeler with a nanny and a 21 or whatever year-old wife. Alan? Oh, I'm remembering these names. Where's he? I don't know what happened to him. He's certainly an evil dude. But you know what's really funny is maybe he's not. What if Netflix constructed the narrative just to make him look really evil? Because I'm not sure that personally, and again, be nice in the comment section, but if you disagree, you're free to voice your opinion. But I didn't catch the evil vibes in Jeff. They were strange. They were weird. But, and the proof's in the pudding. If he actually did back off and not kill somebody, it shows that he does have a conscience. And so, he caught a lot of flack. This dude, the fat guy who rides on the skidoo, I don't even know what he's about. I've watched that show 3 times and I can't figure out what his role is, but they sure made him a very important subject in the creation of the whole. That scene, it's like a meme, when he's riding, dun, 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 dun. I mean, who is that dude? I still don't understand it. But he adds flavor and he adds intrigue. And that also maintains some of these consequences, which I think may be right, may be wrong, but they also could be perhaps unethically employed. And I love Netflix. I think they do some really great stuff. But I think I'm really very curious about whether they were planful in wanting this narrative to continue and continue and continue and make more money and make more money and make more money and not give a shit and not give a shit and not give a shit about the consequences that fall on the people that were acting in the movie or portrayed in the movie. That's all I'm saying. I love the series. It's great, but I question what I'm seeing. So with that, thanks for listening. And welcome once again, goodbye. Thank you once again for being with me in another fun-filled heretical episode of Inside the World of Mack's Headroom. Be safe and be respectful of everybody out there. Don't go spreading that virus, please.